You're listening to Snippets from the Summit with your host, Scott McKay.
All right, how's it going, gentlemen? This is your main man, Scott McKay, coming at you again with another Snippet from the Summit as part of the Mountaintop podcast from X&Y Communications. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is widely discussed, especially in masculinity circles out there, but it has a lot to do ultimately with how well you're going to attract women. We're going to talk about rites of passage. Now, in this culture, we don't have a very specific rite of passage as they do, say, in the Maasai tribe or other cultures around the world, where a boy very specifically at a moment in time underwent a ritual to become a man right then and there. Nowadays, in postmodern culture here in the West, kids go to school, they graduate from school, they go to college, then they go to graduate school, maybe they get a job, maybe they move out from their mom and dad's nest, maybe they don't, maybe they stay at home indefinitely. I think for years and years, graduating from high school was seen as a rite of passage from boyhood to manhood. After all, boys at that age were about 18 years old, and at that point in history, say 40, 50 years ago, you could go buy a beer. You could certainly be drafted into the army to go to war and potentially die for your country. You were able to vote, etc., etc. But the drinking age crept up to 21. Other rights crept up to age 21. And with more and more people going off to college, that rite of passage became unclear. And flash forward to nowadays, and boys or men or whatever you want to call them, because we really don't have that rite of passage defined anymore nowadays, right? Are going off to graduate school, or they're coming back home and living with mommy and daddy indefinitely. Maybe they'll get a job, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just stay home and play video games and watch porn. Who knows? Well, here's the first twist I want to put onto this conversation that people have been having about the rite of passage from boyhood to manhood. It's not that we don't have a rite of passage. I believe that rite of passage is hiding in plain sight. And I also do believe that boys want to become men. The irony of the whole thing is parents complain to their young boys all the time that they're not yet able to handle what defines this rite of passage. And yet, in many ways, boys either resist that rite of passage because they're being told to do it, or they just don't realize the importance of it to actually reaching manhood. So what is the rite of passage for boys to manhood? I believe it's responsibility. And I believe it's primal. I believe it's hardwired into our humanity. And all of those other cultures that have well-defined rites of passage from boyhood to manhood, what they're doing is they're ushering boys from an era of being taken care of, someone being responsible for them, to a new era where they are responsible for themselves and for perhaps other people as well. They're becoming leaders. They're becoming men. So how did this get clouded? Well, before we talk about that, let's reveal also very quickly what the rite of passage for girls to becoming women actually is. Well, that would be nurturing. Young girls are nurtured by their mothers, and when they become women, they in turn become the nurturers to children themselves. Well, given those circumstances, the clear rite of passage from girlhood to womanhood would be pregnancy and childbirth, right? It only makes sense. Well, obviously, young girls aren't having babies in this culture, at least not on purpose, and motherhood is being delayed post-high school, post-college, post-graduate school. In many cases, women are opting out from motherhood altogether. Now, are those female human beings finding other ways to define themselves as women? Well, yes, they are. What they're doing is they're co-opting the male rite of passage. They're becoming responsible adults, and in that way, defining themselves as women. So you can easily start to see why this whole rite of passage thing has become clouded in this culture nowadays. Responsibility is part of adulthood, whether you're a woman or a man, now isn't it? Adults need to be responsible adults. They need to take charge of their own lives. They They need to lead others. If they do have children, obviously they need to teach those children how to be responsible someday, as they're in turn responsible for them during their childhood. And similarly, nurturing is a human responsibility. Do we as men not nurture our sons and daughters? Well, we do in our own masculine way. So the reason why the rite of passage associated with responsibility for manhood and with nurturing for womanhood has gotten obscured is, well, not only because culture has helped obscure it, as we've talked about already, this postmodern culture of ours, but also because responsibility and nurturing are not necessarily masculine and feminine traits in and of themselves. The difference there that needs to be noted is that responsibility from a masculine perspective is what transforms us from a boy to a man, whereas nurturing from a feminine perspective is what transforms a girl into a woman. Do you see that nuance? Because it's not only very real and very important, it's the reason why people do not recognize responsibility as a rite of passage for boys and nurturing as a rite of passage for girls. People in general in Western culture merely see them as human virtues to be acquired sometime during adulthood, hopefully. I would say that's especially true in the case of people not recognizing responsibility as a rite of passage for boys because of what I just mentioned a couple minutes ago. Women are nowadays co-opting responsibility as a rite of passage into adulthood in general. So yes, we're being defined, man or woman, as adults by being responsible adults. We have a rite of passage into adulthood that's still pretty clear. But what's gotten cloudy is that responsibility specifically defines a man versus a boy. It is gender specific. It is masculinity specific. So gentlemen, you got to head check yourselves here. Are you a responsible man? Are you taking charge? Or are you letting someone else carry you? Are you playing the victim card? Neither of those are a good look if you want to stop coming off like a boy and enter into true adulthood as a masculine, grown-ass man. Want to talk about this or anything else? Scot at mountaintoppodcast.com. Be good out there.
As always, visit mountaintoppodcast.com for more.